Hello, and welcome to Wellbeing Workshops. Tonight we have the first of a two-part series entitled My Wellbeing Toolbox. My name is Samuel Landau, and together with my wife Shoshana, we are privileged to be the Rabbi and Rebbitzin of Barnet Shul, an amazing, welcoming community that we feel entirely privileged to be the rabbinic couple of. I'm also a clinical psychologist working in the NHS, and you're joining me at the moment from my office at Lister Hospital in Stevenage. Tonight's program is entitled My Wellbeing Toolbox. It's really a set of skills and strategies, some very practical tools to help us manage our well-being at this tricky time. What are we going to be discussing this evening? So first of all, just a word that it's worth bringing a pencil, a paper, bring yourself. Come and sit with us together. Let's really focus for the next 45 minutes or so and learn some helpful material, some new skills and strategies to manage this time. We're going to begin by giving a certain conceptual model to understanding our emotions and distress, as well as our mental health and well-being. We're going to use traffic lights as a very basic model, which is going to segue into a discussion of how we can communicate about our mental health, almost using traffic lights as a means to think together and to discuss where we are at this moment in time. We're going to have quite a focused think about COVID and how COVID is affecting mental health. And one of the reasons that we're putting on this program right now with US TV is we're coming towards the end of lockdown 2.0. It's been a tricky time for so many people. And I want to just normalize and share why this time globally is going to be a time that many of us will feel that we're struggling with our mental health. Tonight, we're going to focus mostly about what to do with it in times of red and on our traffic light and what to do in times of amber. Spoiler alert, next week, we're going to be discussing what to do in terms of maintaining and keeping us in a place of green. So tonight, it's about going down from red to amber and amber to green. And next week, it's about staying green. But whilst we're talking about amber, I want to focus on two particular and very frequent experiences of both low mood on the one hand and worry and anxiety on the other. And then we're going to just share some concluding thoughts at the end of this workshop. So if you want pens and paper at the ready, but most importantly, be here. Let's all be here together as we discuss these ideas. So where am I? It's a question of traffic lights. I want to give a language to our inner world. The first time I really came across this as being such a powerful tool was when my wife Shoshana and myself were moving between Jerusalem and Barnet. You see, we were brought into Barnet already over a year and a half ago, but we were finishing up some studies in Jerusalem. And in the intervening time, we were traveling between Jerusalem and Barnet, so that we were in Barnet for the high points of the Jewish calendar, but going back to Israel for those studies. And when we left England, it felt relatively responsible to take our 3-year-old and drag her over to Jerusalem. But when she was 5 and she was moving back between one country and the other, particularly as we were sort of saying to her, here's your new shul, and here's your new home, and here's your new school, but we're not going to be here for very long, and then we go back to our old home and our old school and our old shul. And we kept on doing that. That was really destabilizing for her. And so a friend of mine suggested, why don't you use traffic lights? Use traffic lights as a means for her to label how she's feeling at the moment. Is she feeling red, just out of control, like not managing the situation at all? Is she feeling orange or amber or yellow, whatever takes your preference? Is she feeling sort of in the middle, sort of on edge, uneasy, not totally flying off the handle, but still wobbly? Or is she feeling green? Is she feeling relatively whole and stable in herself? And we started using those as a means to communicate where we are. And this sort of leads us to think about communication in general. This is a drawing from one of my new favorite books. It's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. I think I've got that order right. And it's by a guy called Charlie McKenzie. And so here, the boy says, what's the bravest thing you've ever said? Asked the boy. Help, said the horse. Sometimes the bravest thing we can say is to ask for help. And so maybe now traffic lights give structure to that. It could be saying to one's partner, to one's parent, to one's child, to one's friend, I'm having a really red day. I'm just feeling totally out of control. I need some help. Or I'm feeling really wobbly. I'm not red yet, but I'm definitely on edge. I'm really feeling quite amber at the moment. Or it could even be saying, thank God, I had a really green day. I'm feeling really whole. And even though there were certain stresses today, I was able to manage it and take it in my stride. So the traffic lights don't only help us label for ourselves, they also help us to communicate where we are to others. And so once we've got traffic lights in place, maybe we can think about why it's so difficult, maybe in general, but particularly at the moment. So here, this slide is entitled, Why Am I Struggling? Because You're Normal. And this really leads on to a very fundamental model of understanding mental health and distress. You see, it's called the Diathesis stress model, which is psychobabble for essentially that any time a person is experiencing mental disorder or distress in an intense form, it's always a combination of two things. It's a combination of a vulnerability, that's a sensitivity to a particular type of distress or a particular experience, and that vulnerability may be genetic, it may be environmental. At this point, it doesn't really matter, it's just there. We all have certain vulnerabilities. And that vulnerability interacts with a life event, with a stressor, with stress. And stress has two forms. And if you look at this graph, you've got the base stress level, which is just sort of general stress, which is around us at this moment in time. And then you've got life events or particular stressors that are the red blocks on top. And so a stressful experience might be a change of job, a loss of job, a bereavement, a loss of relationship. Whereas the base stress level is just general stress that's knocking around in society. And you can imagine that actually both of those things are increasing at this moment in time. There's a base stress level in society. We're in lockdown 2.0. We're coming out, we're not fully coming out because we're now going into this tiered system. We're going to all be in tier 2 at least, probably, maybe even tier 3, depending on where you are in the country. Maybe if you live in the Isle of Wight, you're doing all right in tier 1. But otherwise, we're still in this base stress level where everyone is still on edge. I mean, we'll talk about this when we get to anxiety, but it used to be that you'd walk down the road and you'd see a cute little child walking towards you and you'd smile at them. Now, you don't smile at this child, you're freaking out because maybe this child is infectious. Maybe this child could make me ill, could give me COVID. So even just walking down the street has become an entirely stressful experience. And then, of course, COVID itself has given unique stressful experiences to each and every one of us. Maybe a person has been let go. Maybe there are financial difficulties. Maybe they're on furlough. Maybe they've had a bereavement. They've lost someone to COVID. And so there's so much stress at the moment that we're all sort of reaching our personal limit. We all have also resources that help us raise our personal limit a little bit higher, and that's the orange box. But even those personal resources, those resources such as therapy, friends, a stable living situation, won't necessarily be able to manage all this stress building up. There's just loads and loads of stress around. And so it would be very, very normal for each and every person probably watching this, watching this program, that in the past 6 months or so, there's been moments where we feel we're really red, really out of control, really losing it. Really low, really anxious, maybe even experiencing something that isn't so normal. Hearing a voice. It's very normal to hear a voice, but here maybe a little bit more. So we're being pushed and pushed with our stress levels. So why am I struggling? Because we're normal. So what can we do? How can we manage to go from red to yellow and yellow to green? And final little graph before we jump into our skills and strategies, which is just to think about the most appropriate skills and strategies for a red or yellow time rather than a green time. So this graph shows us that as the strength of emotion increases, we get above our dotted line. So I like to think of our dotted line as where wise mind or rational mind is able to take hold. When we're too emotionally activated, when we're feeling too red or too yellow, it's very difficult to do some of those nice green things. I remember a patient recently said to me, they said, I'm feeling so anxious, and all this sort of nurse or psychologist is telling me is meditate. I don't want to meditate when I'm feeling entirely out of control. That doesn't work. I'm already far too emotionally labile and activated to do that. So The red and the yellow strategies can be very, very behavioral, can be very body-based, because we just need to bring things down into the below the red line, so that then we can actually start to do some of the more processing and thought-based strategies. So you'll see that we'll start in red. It's very, very behavioral. It's very much about something practical to do. And as we move down, there'll be things which are a little bit more cognitive, a little bit more thought-based as well. So let's begin with those practical strategies and tasks. Tasks to move below that dotted line to get us from red to yellow and yellow to green. So task number 1 is to calm the body. Many of us sort of underestimate how much emotions affect our physical body. You might have experienced this, that in an anxious moment, maybe before an exam or before a job interview or something like that, you feel butterflies in your tummy. Maybe when if you're feeling low, your tummy might start to rumble or growl. You might feel like an emptiness in your tummy. Maybe if you're anxious, you might start to feel tense in your shoulders or tight in your chest. These are all really, really normal, because the body feels the emotion. The body holds that emotion. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's this idea that emotions don't just get left up here. They're just in my head and nothing to do with the rest of me. But no, that our body really holds emotion as well. So much so that actually one of the main client groups that I see here at the hospital are people with medically unexplained symptoms. So that means that someone's come into hospital with seizures, with spasms, maybe with gastro problems, and they go through all the normal diagnostic tests in neurology or gastro, and the doctors can't find anything physiological or organic that is underlying these symptoms. Instead, they're medically unexplained. That means the medical doctors can't explain it, but maybe the psychiatrists and the psychologists can explain it, because this is a spiritual distress, but it's being felt in the body. It's being felt as a seizure or a spasm or a gastro problem. And so the first thing we need to do, if we're feeling really red, really activated, really low, really intensely anxious, really panicky, is to calm the body. And there are 3 different tools here. The first one is to breathe. So breathing here is to have paced breathing, to control our breathing a little bit. You could do something like breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 5 seconds, and breathe out for 5 seconds. We could just try that now. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Already I can feel, as I was just pacing that together with you, everything seems to just slow down a little bit. There's a really good app actually called Breathe, funnily enough, which will help to monitor and to pace that breathing if you want some help doing that. So the first thing you could do is just flip open the app, bring out the breathe, and breathe in, hold, and breathe out. Another thing that we can do with our body to calm it down is to manage temperature changes. So temperature of the body can really fluctuate as we're feeling, as our emotions maybe are growing and growing. One of the things that we can do is we can do a body hack. So the body has an instinctive mechanism that if it feels like it's cooling down very quickly, so it slows down some of the core functions of the body in order to preserve energy. So for example, if a person was to jump into an ice pool in Siberia, so then the body would immediately slow down the heart, slow down the breathing, slow everything down, constrict the blood flow to the extremities and draw that blood back into the core in order to preserve vital functions. And you can hack that by also activating the parasympathetic nervous system by doing it artificially. So for example, you fill the sink or fill a big bowl with cold water, maybe throw in a few ice cubes if you want, but really cold water from the tap will do, particularly when the temperature is outside. Allow the tap to run, let the warm water from the house come through, and then let the cold water from outside. Fill up the bowl, maybe not for the faint-hearted, put a towel around your neck, and then dunk your head into the water for 20 seconds, come out, wait, and dunk it again. And when you do this, you might need to have a chair next to you, because you can actually feel quite faint afterwards, because everything just calms down. Everything slows down, because it's your body hacking. You're telling your body everything needs to slow down. The breathing slows down, the heart slows down. And so I can take me from a hyperactive state, a really intense state of emotion, and they can just calm it down. And the final part of calming the body is to relax the muscles. So here you could use something called progressive muscle relaxation, which is where you take different muscle groups and you tighten them. So for example, let's say I'm starting with my hand. So I tighten my hand really intensely and I hold it for 5 seconds really tight, and then I let go. And when I do that, so I've tensed and tensed and tensed, and then I've let go. So that automatically lets the muscles relax in a way they couldn't before. So I tighten the next muscle up, I might tighten my biceps and my triceps, and then I let go. And then I'm going to tighten the top of my chest, and then I let go. And again, so progressive muscle relaxation can be a really helpful tool. Some of these things are also helpful to practice in advance of a red moment. So it might be that you're sort of sitting at work or in the car, and you might be working through your muscle groups or practicing paced breathing in readiness of a time when you want to just pull that tool out the bag. So that's the first thing, calm the body. The next thing is cool the mind. So cooling the mind would refer to trying to bring our mind back from running away with panic or ruminating about the past. I just need to get right here into this present moment. Where am I right now? And sometimes that requires me to sort of feel where I am, to smell the air, to taste what's going on. I've known colleagues who've suggested to clients who are really, really struggling just to lie on the ground and feel the ground and smell the grass and touch the earth and touch the dirt. These are things that can just bring me back to where I am right now. They ground me in right now. And then there's also a certain mindfulness of being outside the body and mind. So sometimes we can get so stuck in those racing thoughts that I need to have a sense of self which is detached from that. So yes, my mind feels like it's getting out of control, but there's a part of me that is beyond that. We might call it our soul, our spirit, our consciousness. Let me get into a slightly higher state of consciousness where I can look down at what's going on rather than sitting inside that rush and that flood of feelings. The third thing we can do is to act opposite. This is a really, really fun tool, which essentially says that every emotion has a call to action. So anxiety has a call to action. Low mood has a call to action. There are things that those feelings want us to do. And what we can try and do is get on top of that and act the opposite. So if I'm pacing, lie down. If my fists are clenched, open up my hands to be willing hands. If I'm fidgeting, right, and I'm fiddling with whatever it is, you know, like I've got my NHS badge and I'm just like moving around, so just sit on my hands. Just sit on those hands and don't let them fidget, because the fidgeting is an expression of anxiety. But if I can stop that action, so it starts to take away the intensity of the emotion. If I'm running away, stay still. And the final part is to move towards a valued goal. So once we've calmed the emotions down, let's do something positive. Let's sort of move beyond this moment. So I'm not very good at having a tidy office. So tidying the desk is always very good. Hoovering, I love hoovering because you see instant results. Making a cup of tea for someone. You know, I'm making a hot drink. Would you like a cup of tea? It's really nice also to get out of myself and offer something to another person. Sorting out my email inbox, I feel like an absolute champion every time I get to 0 and then someone else pops an email in. But sorting out an email box, doing something, a small goal, a small task that we can just move us towards a valued goal. We can now live in sync with our values rather than trapped in this emotion. Also, writing a list can be really helpful. So, whoops, I moved too fast there. So we've gone now from red maybe down to yellow to amber, but there are times that red needs a few other things just to help it along. One of the things that we can do is to just distract ourselves. Now, some of these acronyms, you see accepts as an acronym with the different unpacking on the right hand side. So some of these are tools that come from DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which is really, really helpful for managing intense emotion. And sometimes the best we can do is just to distract ourselves. So accepts, we can simply just accept that this emotion isn't going to go away and we're going to have to distract from it. I'm not going to be able to change anything right now, but at least it's not going to be in control because I have distracted myself from it. I'm no longer sitting overpowered by that emotion. So accept. A, activities. Do something else. Just do something. So maybe you've got a hobby that you like to do. Go for a walk, play a sport, cook, garden, go shopping, go fishing, do something. Just get involved in something else to distract us from this moment. And contributing. It's so powerful to see what's been happening during COVID as people have been offering their charity, their time, their tzedakah, their chesed, their kindness to other people. So contributing can be so powerful. Do some volunteer work, babysit for a friend, do something nice or surprising for someone, even just sending a text to someone saying, I'm thinking of you, how are you? That can be so powerful to hold someone else in mind. The next one is a little bit controversial. It's making a comparison. So it's sort of like saying, let's gain some greater perspective on what's really happening to me right now. This might, for some people, feel invalidating, and it might help other people. So really sort of take this on with a pinch of salt. If this works for you, great. If not, then fine. So a comparison that maybe I make sometimes is that my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. So I think about my grandmother sitting in Auschwitz-Birkenau and having been selected by Dr. Mengele and what was happening in her childhood compared to what's happening to me right now. And actually, that comparison just puts things into a little bit of a different perspective as to the suffering of COVID compared to other suffering. But this is not the worst suffering in the world. This is suffering, but this is not my grandmother sitting in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And so sometimes that can actually help to distract from the emotion. It can just sort of let things go. Other people find that a little bit invalidating, so take it with a pinch of salt. Another way that we can distract ourselves is with emotions. So sometimes selecting out an emotional experience that will force almost the opposite of what we are feeling right now. So you might want to watch a silly movie, like a Mr. Bean movie. You're feeling really low, you're feeling really anxious, you just want to see something silly. It's just a laugh, to have a good belly laugh. Now, maybe Mr. Bean doesn't do it for you. Put in your own sort of category, Big Bang Theory, Friends, whatever it is. Put something in there that gives you a good belly laugh, and that could offer up an alternative emotion to the one we're feeling right now. Pushing away. Again, some people find this invalidating, but other people find this really powerful. I had a client who was full of anxiety. And so what we used to do is at the end of the day, he'd write down his anxieties on a piece of paper and he'd put it in the anxiety bag and he'd get rid of it. He'd put it in the bag and he'd chuck it away, like a shopping bag, and throw it away. Push away. Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't want to have you here right now. You are now on this piece of paper, and this piece of paper is now going in the bin. Another way to distract ourselves is with thoughts. So using other thoughts. Some people really live in their thinking. So using other thoughts, maybe that could be a crossword, it could be Sudoku, it could even be something just like counting sheep or counting tiles on the wall or creating patterns and pictures. Sometimes just allowing our thinking to go off in a different direction. It might even be logging into US TV and learning something. Just having a thinking space which is outside of this moment can be really good. And the final part of distraction is sensations. To use something quite physical and quite intense as a means to shock myself and distract myself from this moment. So one of my friend's favorites is to take a bag of frozen peas from the freezer and just put it on his neck. And that is such a jarring moment that you can't but help. It's like smelling salts. You can't but help but be lifted out of that moment. Any sort of strong physical stimulus is good for this, to jog us out of that time. And so we've got those four first strategies of calm the body, cool the mind, and then moving on to distraction. And then possibly we want to now change the moment a little bit, to reevaluate this moment. So how to do that with another acronym, which is IMPROVE. So what does IMPROVE stand for? We want to now basically, we're moving slightly down from red to yellow, and we're in yellow and we just want to improve ourselves a little bit. It's that little bit of encouragement to change the moment. So I for imagery. So using some thought exercises, some imagination about what we'd really like to happen now. Sometimes one of the most powerful questions I can ask someone is, ideally, what would you like to feel, to think, to experience right now? And we can create a little bit of imagination. If you're a Trekkie, you might think about it like your holodeck. So you might have a little mental holodeck of really, where would I like to be? You might even call up some old moments, an old holiday, you might, or a very happy time, and just put that into one's head. It can change the moment. It can change the light with which I'm experiencing this moment. M for meaning. So we're Jewish, so we're very good at putting meaning into suffering, because we've had to do that for the past 2,000 years and more. And there's no time like the present to practice that. So yes, so many of us are suffering right now. but is there meaning to be found? And I think for me, as a rabbi and a psychologist, listening to people's accounts of COVID, so many of them explain how difficult it has been, but then there's been a silver lining. So for some people, that's been being around their friends and family more than they've been able to in the past. For others, it's not having to commute to work. For others, it's being able to get involved in their community in a way that they haven't been able to before. In Barnet, we've got about 70 volunteers calling all the vulnerable and elderly members of our community. And so many of them, I think so many of our volunteers get just as much as the recipients of those calls, because there's meaning to this moment. P, pray. Talk to God. That doesn't necessarily mean a formal prayer service. I know we're all going to be going back. Well, the synagogues will be opening again for communal prayer, but God's right here, right now. Talk to him right now, right here, whenever you are, in whatever language you want. It doesn't have to be in Hebrew. It can be whatever language, and in whatever way, as if God's there, an attentive and caring friend. Pray. Ask for help. Ask for insight, for strength. R, relax. Do something to chill out. Whether that's a movie, whether that's a bath. Some people like to relax with sport. Whatever it is, do something to change that moment. Calm things down. Oh, this is quite a big one. One thing at a time. So many of us have so much going on that it almost feels overwhelming. There's just so much to do. And actually, therefore, having all these things to do freezes me. Where do I start? So sometimes it's so helpful to improve that moment by writing a list, prioritizing what to do first, what to do second, and then working through one thing at a time. As the sages of the Talmud says, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. You should try to grab onto too much. It doesn't work. You don't grab anything. One thing at a time. Truthfully, sometimes we all need a vacation. I know that's quite difficult at the moment because many of us think about vacations as being away, abroad, but we can have a vacation from work. We can have a day off. We can have a staycation. We can have a day where we just go out for a walk in the woods. And we all need this sometimes. And E, encouragement. This is seeking encouragement from others, from people that we love and love us, and also seeking encouragement from ourselves, being kind to ourselves, encouraging that we can do this, we can climb that mountain. Okay, so really those few slides have brought us, hopefully, down from red and into amber, into yellow. A place which is still quite wobbly, but we're not feeling entirely out of control. I think for me, amber is going to be dominated by two different experiences. One is low mood, and the other one is anxiety. And so let's begin by talking about low mood, and then we'll move on to anxiety, because I think anxiety is going to be also particularly experienced by so many of us at the moment, all the health anxiety and the issues that come around with COVID. So low mood needs a good base. A good base. So what does BASE stand for? So many acronyms, probably just because they're easy to remember. So B, body care. Forgive the pun or forgive the expression or forgive the reference, but the holy trinity of B is exercise, diet, and rest. But if we get the body stuff right, if we can have a consistent exercise regime, healthy diet, and good rest, we're just going to be setting ourselves up on such a better platform, such a rock solid platform, that it'll be much easier to manage all the stuff that life throws at us. Now, I'm not suggesting that we go straight into this. It's like making a massive lifestyle change, but little shifts in that direction, in exercise, diet, and rest, are going to make really substantive and significant differences. Exercise evidence shows us that 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week is enough to absolutely transform a person's mental health. So 150 minutes a week, that's something like 3 times 50 minutes of going for a brisk walk, a little jog, a relatively moderate bike ride, a swim, if that's something that you can do, something that is going to get the heart pumping and our breath panting just a little bit. That is going to make a big change. Now, I know from personal experience that getting into an exercise regime can be tricky, and so therefore sometimes it's really helpful to have an exercise partner. The great thing about lockdown 2.0 has been that even though we've been really restricted on so many areas, the government has said that exercise, you can do it with a partner. So if you do have someone who you can have accountability and trust to work these things through together. So then you can schedule in a jog or a bike ride together, and that would really make a big difference. Healthy diet and rest, these are things that just allow the body to be ticking over in the best way it can possibly be. Then, in order to improve that low mood, we need to do things that give us a sense of achievement. There are different types of pleasure. One of the types of pleasure is not simply enjoy, which we'll see at the end of base, but rather to achieve, to sort of feel that I'm on top of something. I can do something. I can make a difference, whether that's achievement at work, achievement at home, with a house, with the chores of the house, or achievement with study. So there are all different things that give people achievement. And one of the things that I love is to put together IKEA furniture. I feel like I'm a king. I feel like an absolute boss when I put together a piece of IKEA furniture, or even doing something like tidying the kitchen. It feels amazing because you can see very tangible results of that achievement. C, connecting with others. We're social beings. We need connection. Even the best introvert will still need to have someone else in their life. And often low mood makes us very inward looking. And it can almost feel like no one wants to be with us. And we find it difficult to call for help. So going back to that earlier slide, what's the bravest thing you've ever said is help. But can we connect with friends? Can we connect with family? Can we connect with other members of our community? Can we connect with God? Can we connect with others in this time to give us those bubbles of oxygen, of being in touch with others, of being held in mind and heart by other people? And finally, in terms of low mood, activities that we enjoy, things that just make us feel good. Play, fun, pleasure. Life is too serious to take it very seriously all the time. We all need to have a bit of fun. And when you put base together, when you put all these things in place, that can really just boost a person's mood. The other very common experience in terms of mental health difficulties in this amber sort of area, and particularly during COVID, is this feeling of anxiety. As I mentioned before, it didn't used to be the case that walking down the street and seeing a child walking towards you would make you feel anxious. But nowadays, that's exactly what happens. You see someone walking towards you on the same side of the road, and you might cross the other side of the road. You're walking through Sainsbury's. When did Sainsbury's ever become this fraught experience? But now you're carefully navigating the aisles, making sure that you're not going too close to anybody else, listening at all times if someone is coughing. I don't know about you, but I always have to kind of apologize. I have a cold, it's not COVID, because we are all so anxious about this. And understandably so. We're living in a time where so many people have become unwell, are still unwell, and are suffering in hospital and dying because of this virus. But we need to talk about what anxiety does to us, because whilst I've just normalized anxiety, it's also something that can take over a person's life. We might start to have second thoughts about leaving our home in the morning, going for a walk, going to the shops. And so anxiety might start to shut life down. And the thing about anxiety is anxiety demands to be taken care of. So what I've got over here is I've got an anxiety curve. So if you'll notice that anxiety is on the vertical axis and time is on the horizontal axis. So as time progresses and we get exposed to something that gives us a sense of anxiety. So let's imagine, I used to have a patient who was always scared of crossing a road. So she actually got to the point where she couldn't leave the house except with a taxi in front of the house to take her directly to her destination, because the very idea of crossing the road was something that filled her with absolute worry and anxiety. So let's imagine she comes to the edge of a road and her anxiety shoots up. It shoots up at this early point of the graph. And so that's the point where over here it says there's rapidly increasing anxiety, which motivates an urge to escape. At that point, anxiety says, look after me, get rid of me. And we'll grab onto anything we can to try and to calm that anxiety down. It's like sort of the analog of a child cuddling onto their teddy bear when they're feeling worried. So we will, if it's about crossing the road, so we might distract ourselves by looking at our smartphone, or we might run over to a pedestrian crossing, or stand really far back from the edge of the road. We'll just do something to try and allow the anxiety, to try and get the anxiety to come down. Because the common and mistaken expectation is that anxiety will continue to increase catastrophically. The anxiety, we imagine, we fantasize that the anxiety is going to go up and up and up, and we're gonna go into a full-blown panic attack. We're gonna have a heart attack. We're gonna pass out because we're breathing with such intensity. And actually, unless you have a heart condition, that's impossible. It's biologically impossible, because anxiety causes the release of adrenaline. Adrenaline is the fight, flight, or freeze response, and that's meaning that my body is now ready. It's in a state of readiness to respond to a threat. And so in that time of readiness, we can't actually pass out, but we think that we might. And so what do? Is we avoid that anxiety, that situation. We run away from it, or we sort of grab onto some sort of safety to help us feel that we can manage that moment. What we often don't do is just sit there experiencing the anxiety. But if we do that, what actually happens is that the anxiety rises, we get activated, but the anxiety then has nothing that meets it other than the fact that we're still here, we're still okay. So for that patient, she's still standing by the side of the road and nothing bad has happened. And so a reprogramming happens. It's called exposure and response prevention. I expose myself to the anxiety and I prevent the response of avoiding it or running away or grabbing onto a safety. Instead, I just stay with it and I habituate myself to that situation. And then the anxiety comes down and there's a reduction in my fear and in my worry. And the more and more I do that, the easier and easier this process becomes, until after a number of, I think it was about a 12-week program of exposure and response prevention for this particular person who was trying to cross roads, she was able to cross any road that she wanted to cross. So there's the same thing over here. The challenge to get from amber to green is to allow ourselves to feel anxious, to not avoid that anxiety, maybe to breathe, just to be with that anxiety, let it rise and let it fall again and notice it falling. And sometimes you can even sort of chart that progression. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling 8, I'm feeling 9, I think it's going to get to 11, but actually it just went down to 6. I can manage this. This is something I can do. And perhaps a tool that we can do today, and we can just start to practice right now, is stop. So here's a quote from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl is saying that we often go straight from input to output. We see a line, we run away. Input and output. But actually there's a space in between that. There's a moment within which that we can get on top of this situation. We see a child walking towards us down the street. We might have this illusion that automatically creates anxiety. But actually we can stop. What does stop mean? Stop. S. Stop. Just pause for a moment. T. Take a breath. Notice our breathing as we breathe in and out. O. Observe. Observe this moment. What thoughts, feelings, what body sensations am I experiencing? What's trying to pull my attention? What am I reacting to? Then P, pull back. Get perspective on this moment. I need some space to try and just feel, to understand, to get a bigger picture. Maybe this is just a thought. It's not reality. My thought is that this child is a seething source of COVID. That's just a thought. It's not necessarily reality. What's the bigger picture here? Take the helicopter perspective. Imagine that you're standing from above, looking at you, looking at this situation, looking at what's going on around you. Is this a thought? Is this thought that I'm having, is it fact or is it opinion? And maybe a very sort of perspective offering thought, gamze ya'avor, this too will pass. Whatever is happening right now, it's going to pass. And then the final P, practice what works and proceed. What's the best thing to do right now? So what do I have in my experience? What do I know has worked in the past? What can I do that fits with my values? I've got values, I've got morals and ethics, and I've got things that are important to me. So how can I activate those values to make sure that I can do something that is consistent with them? So many of us sometimes respond to situations where we're feeling like we're losing control by getting stuck into soothing practices that aren't consistent with our values. Well, let's do something else. If it's not consistent with my values to reach for the bottle, then don't do that. Do something else. What's going to be something that does fit with my values? What will be effective and appropriate to respond to this moment? So stop. And the thing is that stop can be practiced, again, not just at times of distress, but it can be practiced outside of times of distress so that we can whip it out of our toolbox when we need it most. So at any point, we can just stop, take a breath, observe, pull back, and practice. You do that 3 times a day, once a day, for the next week or 2. It's a tool that you've developed already, something that's ready to be used. And so now, as we move towards the end of the presentation, just some final thoughts. Don't forget, there's always someone here to help you. Never worry alone. Worrying about ourselves, worrying about our loved ones and others can really feel very isolating. Never worry alone. Share one's worries with someone else. That could be with a friend, that could be with a rabbi, that could be with a GP, but don't worry alone. And so with that in mind, it's just some further resources that you might want to take up. If you're ever really worried, we've been speaking about strategies and skills. That's really important. But if you're worried that this is beyond the ability for strategies and skills to help with, then that's what the GP is there for. Give them a call, whether it's a Zoom consultation or an in-person consultation, whatever your GP is offering at the moment. The GP will be able to make the right kind of call in terms of referral or help and advice that they can give. So never worry alone. One of the places that we can go for help is to go to our GP. That's what they're there for. Then we've got loads in the Jewish community in particular, but also in broader society, we've got loads of charitable organizations that are amazing for mental health. We've got Jamie, Jewish Association of Mental Illness. We've got Mind. Relief is an organization within the Jewish community that links up people to therapists. If therapy is something that you might want to look into, to just give a little bit of thinking space and help to manage difficult times. And again, you can look on the internet. There are just so many different organizations and with things with particular interests as well. Another thing that can be really nice is to keep a diary, to sort of get a sense of how things are moving. How many times was I able to use stop this week? How many times was I able to cool the mind or calm the body? Keeping a diary of what's going on, and maybe also to do that with a friend and to share notes. We talked about accountability and support from a friend in terms of changing one's lifestyle, but this can even be true in terms of improving a person's mental health and well-being. Keep a diary and maybe share that diary with someone that cares about you and you care for. And of course, you could always join us next week for our next session, which will be thinking about how we stay green, making space and keeping balanced. And maybe just a concluding thought before we review what we've done today is we haven't spoken a huge amount about God, but God wants you to be as well as you can possibly be. God loves you. You're his child. And if God wants you to be as well as you can possibly be, it must be that you can be as well as you can possibly be. So be strong, be brave, be courageous. Ask for help when you need it, and practice these tools and strategies to be as well as you can possibly be. Thank you for logging in this evening. What we covered today is we covered the traffic lights model, a very simple model of sort of charting where I am. Am I feeling red? Am I feeling amber? Am I feeling green? And maybe using even that model as a means to communicate how I'm feeling with others. We talked about the particular challenges of COVID creating just a huge amount of stress, that it's just so normal to feel red, to feel amber at this moment in time during these past few months. Then we looked at particular strategies and skills for moving down from red to amber, and then from moving from amber back to green, with a particular focus on low mood and worry and anxiety. And we finished up with those concluding thoughts that God loves you, he cares for you, and that you can do this. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I look forward to sharing more skills and ideas in next week's workshop, Making Space, Staying Green. That's all from me. Goodbye.